Imagine standing in the shadow of the Great Pyramid as the desert wind howls around you. These stones have been here for over 4,500 years, yet they hold secrets that science still struggles to explain. How were structures of such impossible precision built with tools that should have been far too simple? What rituals echoed in the hidden chambers beneath the sands? And what knowledge did the ancient Egyptians possess that we may have lost to time? This is not just a story about pharaohs and tombs. It's about a civilization whose achievements seem to defy the very limits of their era. From mysterious carvings that depict impossible machines to artifacts forged from metal that fell from the sky, ancient Egypt continues to challenge everything we think we know about the past. So sit back, open your mind, and prepare to explore the unsolved mysteries of one of history's most brilliant and baffling civilizations. Deep within the rugged cliffs of the Valley of the Kings, where the Theban sun beats mercilessly against the ochre-colored stone, a narrow passage descends into darkness. The air grows cooler, stiller, and heavier with each step downward. Here, in this world carved from living rock, lies a burial that has perplexed scholars for over a century. The tomb associated with Queen Tiye, the great royal wife of Amenemhat III and matriarch of one of ancient Egypt's most turbulent dynasties. At first glance, there is little to distinguish this tomb from the others hidden within the valley. Its walls bear the same ancient scars of tomb robbers and time, its chambers stripped of the wealth that once adorned them. But there is something about this burial, about the story it tells, and the questions it refuses to answer, that makes it unlike any other. Queen Tiye was no ordinary queen. She was a woman of remarkable influence, said to have been the trusted advisor to her husband, and perhaps even a co-ruler during the height of Egypt's 18th dynasty. The Amarna letters, a cache of diplomatic correspondence discovered in the late 19th century, reveal her as a powerful political figure who negotiated with foreign kings and played a crucial role in maintaining Egypt's empire. She was also the mother of Akhenaten, the pharaoh who would upend centuries of religious tradition in a dramatic experiment to worship a single god, the Aten. And yet, for all we know of Tiye's life, her death and burial remain shrouded in uncertainty. For decades, scholars debated where she was laid to rest. Some suggested she was buried in her husband's magnificent mortuary temple at Kom el Hitan, now mostly lost to time. Others believed she was entombed somewhere near Amarna, alongside her radical son. But in 2010, genetic studies on a set of mummies long stored in the Cairo Museum revealed a startling conclusion. One of the unidentified women, discovered decades earlier in the tomb of Amenemhat II, K535, was almost certainly Queen Tiye. This mummy, known as the Elder Lady, had been found alongside a younger female and a mysterious, badly damaged boy's body. When her hair was compared to a lock found in the burial mask of Tutankhamun, the match was undeniable. DNA confirmed her identity as the grandmother of Tutankhamun, the mother of Akhenaten, and thus Queen Tiye herself. But this revelation only deepened the mystery. Why was Tiye found in K35, a tomb that was not built for her? Some scholars suggest that her original burial place had been desecrated during the backlash against Akhenaten's religious revolution, and her body was reburied here for protection. Others propose that K535 may have served as a kind of royal cache, a place where priests secretly relocated important mummies to protect them from rampant tomb robbing during the Third Intermediate Period. And there are stranger questions still. Was Tiye ever buried with the elaborate funerary equipment that a queen of her stature would have commanded? If so, where is it now? No funerary texts, no personal jewelry, no golden mask. Nothing definitively tied to her has been found beyond her body itself. Some researchers suspect that her burial goods may have been stolen and melted down in antiquity. Others wonder if they still lie hidden, perhaps in an undiscovered chamber somewhere within the valley. There are even more speculative theories. A handful of fringe researchers have suggested that Tiye may have been involved in the religious upheaval of the Amarna period to a greater degree than we realize, perhaps even as a driving force behind Akhenaten's monotheistic revolution. If that were the case, could her reburial have been politically motivated, an attempt to erase or at least obscure her connection to one of the most controversial periods in Egyptian history? As you stand in the tomb, surrounded by the silent witness of the stone, it is difficult not to wonder. The Valley of the Kings was meant to be a place of eternal rest, yet it has become a puzzle box, each discovery raising new questions rather than answering old ones. How many times were Tiye's remains moved in the centuries after her death? How much of her original tomb remains undiscovered or perhaps destroyed? And what might still lie beneath the sands, waiting for the right archaeologist with the right tools to uncover it? The story of Queen Tiye's tomb is a reminder that even in an age of genetic testing and satellite imaging, the past can still keep its secrets. It is a tale not only of a queen, but of a dynasty on the brink of religious and political transformation, a family whose legacy was nearly erased, and yet, somehow, endured. Perhaps somewhere in a sealed chamber yet to be found, the rest of Tiye's burial still waits. Her jewelry, her statues, her texts, the things that would tell us who she truly was. Or perhaps those things are gone forever, leaving us only with her silent, watchful face and the few fragments of a story we are still piecing together. And so, the mystery remains. Who was Queen Tiye in the final years of her life? Where was she first laid to rest? And why was she moved, not once, but perhaps several times, through the centuries? The valley keeps its silence, and we are left with the haunting thought that some secrets are meant to stay buried. As we leave behind the story of Queen Tiye, her displaced burial, her missing treasures, and the lingering questions surrounding her final resting place, we turn our attention to another queen whose tomb tells a very different story, one that begins not with a body, but with an empty chamber. Beneath the blazing sun, just east of the Great Pyramid of Giza, a shaft plunges down into the bedrock. Its narrow walls lead to a chamber cut deep below the plateau, a space that, when first discovered in 1925, stunned the archaeological world. This was no ordinary burial. The chamber contained a dazzling collection of treasures, a gilded bed, chairs of inlaid wood and ivory, finely crafted boxes, even a magnificent canopy. Every object seemed fit for a queen, and indeed, the inscriptions revealed the name of Queen Hetepheres, mother of Khufu, the very pharaoh credited with commissioning the Great Pyramid itself. But there was something missing, something critical. There was no body. The tomb of Queen Hetepheres remains one of the great enigmas of Egyptology. George Reisner, the Harvard archaeologist who made the discovery, believed that Hetepheres had originally been buried elsewhere, perhaps in a grander tomb that was later desecrated. According to his theory, her son Khufu, eager to honor her memory, had her funerary goods reburied here, but by that time, her body had already been lost or destroyed. This explanation is plausible, but it leaves gaps that continue to puzzle researchers. Why would Khufu not have commissioned a completely new burial? Why was this particular shaft chosen, tucked away in the shadow of the pyramid complex? And why were the burial goods placed in such a way that suggested a hurried reinterment rather than a carefully planned ceremony? Some scholars argue that the shaft itself may have been intended as Hetepheres' original tomb all along. But if that were true, why does it lack many of the architectural features typical of royal burials of the Fourth Dynasty? Its simplicity contrasts sharply with the grandeur of the objects within, as though the queen's spirit were meant to rest in a palace of gold, but found herself confined to a mere storeroom beneath the earth. And then there is the matter of the alabaster sarcophagus. When Reisner's team opened it, they found it empty, not even a trace of bone or bandages. The absence of any remains is one of the most haunting details of this discovery. Was the body removed deliberately in antiquity? Was it stolen? Or did the queen's burial never actually take place here at all? Some researchers have speculated that Hetepheres may have been interred near Khufu's pyramid, in one of the subsidiary pyramids or hidden shafts that have yet to be fully explored. Others have suggested that she might have been buried elsewhere on the Giza plateau, perhaps in a tomb that remains undiscovered. And there are those who wonder whether her body might still lie in some forgotten cache, moved during a time of political turmoil and carefully hidden away for safekeeping, just as Tiye's body was centuries later. The discovery of Hetepheres' tomb also raises questions about Khufu himself. The construction of the Great Pyramid was one of the most ambitious projects in human history. Did the loss of his mother's remains, or the desecration of her first burial, play a role in shaping his vision for a monument that would endure forever? Was the Great Pyramid in some way an attempt to assert order, permanence, and control over a world where even the graves of queens could be violated? In recent years, new scanning technologies have revealed hidden voids within the Great Pyramid, sparking fresh speculation about what they might contain. Could one of these mysterious spaces hold the true resting place of Hetepheres? Could the mother of Khufu be lying somewhere close to the monument her son built, waiting to be rediscovered? There are, of course, more speculative theories. Some fringe researchers have suggested that the absence of Hetepheres' body indicates an intentional concealment, that perhaps her burial was kept secret to protect her remains from enemies or to guard some royal or religious mystery. A few even argue that her body might have been placed in a location we would not think to look, a symbolic burial intended to connect her spirit with the sun, the stars, or some sacred landscape feature. Standing at the edge of the shaft today, looking down into the place where her treasures once lay, it is impossible not to feel a sense of unfinished business. The objects from Hetepheres' tomb now sit in museums, gleaming under display lights, but the woman they were meant to serve in the afterlife is still missing. Her story feels suspended, caught somewhere between history and legend. What happened to Queen Hetepheres' body? Was she ever truly buried here? Or was this chamber only a repository for the things that were left behind? Is her true tomb still hidden somewhere beneath the sands of Giza, waiting for a future generation of archaeologists to uncover it? As with Queen Tiye, we are left with more questions than answers. The silence of the Giza plateau seems almost deliberate, as though the stones themselves are keeping a secret. And perhaps they are. Somewhere, just beyond our reach, the rest of Hetepheres' story may still be waiting. The mystery of Queen Hetepheres leaves us with an empty tomb, a story without a body. But just across the Valley of the Kings lies a very different kind of puzzle. A body without a clear story. Tomb. Cave 55 sits quietly in the desert, carved into the eastern cliffs of the valley. Its entrance is unassuming, a simple doorway half buried in sand, discovered in 1907 by Theodore Davis. When the tomb was first opened, those present described an eerie, almost oppressive stillness. Inside, they found a small, undecorated chamber. The walls were plain, devoid of the rich reliefs that cover most royal burials. Yet the contents of the tomb suggested a connection to one of the most dramatic and controversial periods in Egyptian history, the Amarna period. Among the objects were gilded coffin fragments, magical bricks inscribed with the name of Akhenaten, and a set of canopic jars carved with delicate features resembling the Amarna royal family. And there, on the floor of the chamber, lay the remains of a single individual. The mummy was in a poor state of preservation, partly unwrapped and badly damaged. Early examinations suggested it was a young man. Some believed he was Smenkhkare, the mysterious co-regent who may have briefly ruled after Akhenaten's death. Others proposed he was Akhenaten himself, returned from Amarna and reburied here after the backlash against his religious reforms. But nothing about the mummy in KV-55 has ever been simple. Early anatomists disagreed about the age of the skeleton, with estimates ranging from 20 years old to over 40. The tomb's mix of artifacts, some bearing Akhenaten's name, others linked to Tiye and other members of the royal family, only deepened the mystery. Was this a deliberate reburial, a kind of secret repository for disgraced royals? Or was this tomb hastily prepared, meant to hide a pharaoh whose memory many wanted erased? Modern science has tried to settle the question. In 2010, DNA testing confirmed that the KV-55 mummy was almost certainly the father of Tutankhamun, making him either Akhenaten or Smenkhkare. CT scans suggest the man died relatively young, likely in his early 20s, which for many tips the scale toward Smenkhkare. Yet others argue that Akhenaten may also have died young, and that the damage to the skeleton could have distorted earlier age estimates. The controversy goes beyond simple identification. The cause of death remains unknown. Some researchers have noted signs of genetic disease, possibly related to inbreeding within the royal family. Others see evidence of physical trauma, raising the possibility of assassination or ritual killing, though this remains unproven. Then there are the more speculative theories. A handful of researchers have suggested that KV-55 contains a symbolic burial rather than a true one, that the body may have been deliberately desecrated to kill the king a second time, erasing him from history. The badly damaged coffin lid, with its face hacked away, seems to support this interpretation. Some have even wondered whether the body might be an amalgamation, a mix of remains from more than one individual, though DNA evidence makes this unlikely. What makes KV-55 so haunting is the contrast between its plainness and the magnitude of the questions it raises. Here we have, quite possibly, the father of Tutankhamun, a man who played a pivotal role in one of Egypt's most radical experiments, the brief worship of the Aten as the sole god, and yet his tomb is almost barren, his name erased, his body left in neglect. Was this deliberate? Was it a political statement, a punishment in death for his perceived heresy? Or was it simply the result of a rushed reburial during a time of religious and political chaos? The Valley of the Kings was meant to grant eternal life to Egypt's rulers, but the burial in KV-55 feels more like an afterthought, as though the king it contains was never meant to be honored. And yet, more than 3,000 years later, we are still speaking his name, still searching for the truth about who he was and how he died. Standing inside KV-55 today, archaeologists and visitors alike are struck by the silence of the chamber. There are no grand reliefs to guide the soul to the afterlife, no elaborate texts to tell the story of the king's reign. Only the body remains, lying in uneasy rest, a reminder that even in death, some rulers of Egypt could not escape the controversies of their lives. Who truly lies in KV-55? Is this Akhenaten, the heretic king whose sun disk revolution nearly tore Egypt apart? Or is it Smenkhkare, the shadowy figure who may have tried to hold the kingdom together in its final days at Amarna? Could it even be someone else entirely? A forgotten prince whose existence we have only just begun to suspect? For now, the sands keep their secret. KV-55 remains one of the most debated tombs in Egyptology, a puzzle box whose answer might change everything we think we know about the end of the Amarna age. And perhaps, somewhere in the valley, more evidence is waiting. In an undiscovered chamber, a yet unfound cache of inscriptions, or another burial that will bring us closer to the truth. The question of identity in KV 55 takes us back to the Amarna period, a moment in time we can see, touch, and even test with DNA. But if we travel further back, beyond the 18th dynasty, beyond the Old Kingdom, we encounter mysteries that seem to dissolve into shadow. We find ourselves in a time before Egypt was a unified kingdom, before the first pharaohs carved their names into stone. And here, in this twilight of prehistory, we come face to face with one of the most enigmatic relics ever discovered, the King Scorpion Macehead. Today, the Macehead sits quietly in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, displayed under glass, its surface worn but still sharp enough to catch the eye. It is a ceremonial object, a pear-shaped limestone head that once fit atop a wooden shaft, a symbol of power and kingship. Its surface is carved with intricate scenes, the most striking of which shows a ruler, taller than all those around him, wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt. In one hand he holds a hoe, striking the ground in what appears to be a ceremonial act of breaking soil, perhaps inaugurating an irrigation canal. Around him are attendants, standard-bearers, and figures engaged in ritual acts. Crocodiles, birds, and scorpions appear in the register, adding to the object's layered symbolism. But it is the ruler himself, the so-called Scorpion King, who has captured the imagination of scholars for over a century. Who was he? The name Scorpion is not a modern invention. It comes from the glyph carved near the ruler's head. The image of a scorpion, used here as a royal identifier. But was this an actual name? A title? Or a symbolic representation? And was the Scorpion King a single historical figure, or does this Macehead represent a mythic archetype, a composite of early rulers? Most Egyptologists agree that the King Scorpion Macehead dates to the late pre-dynastic period, around 3200 BCE, just before the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under Narmer. This would make the Scorpion King one of the last rulers of Upper Egypt before the birth of a unified kingdom, a shadowy predecessor to the pharaohs. Some have even suggested that he may have been the father or rival of Narmer, the first historically attested king of a unified Egypt. But the Macehead leaves us with more questions than answers. The imagery is unusual, and some researchers have pointed out its ambiguity. Is the Scorpion King performing a peaceful act, digging an irrigation canal, symbolizing prosperity and fertility, or is this a ritual act of conquest, marking new territory won through war? The absence of clear battle scenes has led some to argue that this ruler may have been a unifier through diplomacy rather than force. Others take a different view. The depiction of defeated foes, bound and lying at the king's feet, suggests conflict. Could the Scorpion King have been engaged in the bloody wars that eventually led to Egypt's unification? If so, was he victorious, or was he defeated by Narmer, paving the way for Narmer's consolidation of power? The very existence of this object raises tantalizing questions about the origins of kingship itself. Did Egypt's first rulers inherit their authority from a divine mandate, or was it won through brute force? Was the Scorpion King revered or feared? Was he seen as a semi-divine figure, a precursor to the god-king ideal that would dominate Egyptian culture for millennia? Speculative theories abound. Some fringe researchers have suggested that the scorpion symbol might represent a clan or secret order, not an individual. That the Macehead records not a single king, but an entire faction vying for control of Upper Egypt. Others have wondered whether the Macehead was created much later, as a ritual object meant to invoke the memory of a legendary ruler long gone. And then there are the gaps in the archaeological record. The Macehead was discovered in Hierakonpolis, the ancient city that was once the power center of Upper Egypt. Excavations there have revealed elite burials, ritual enclosures, and evidence of large-scale feasting and sacrifice. But no tomb definitively belonging to the Scorpion King has ever been found. Is it still hidden somewhere beneath the sands, waiting to be uncovered? Could it reveal whether this enigmatic figure was the founder of a dynasty or the last of a vanishing line? Standing before the Macehead, one cannot help but feel a sense of quiet awe. The object is small, unassuming, yet it carries the weight of an entire chapter of human history, a chapter that remains largely unwritten. This single artifact is one of the few windows we have into the political struggles and ritual life of a world that existed more than 5,000 years ago. Who was the Scorpion King? Was he a warrior, a peacemaker, a conqueror, or a myth? Was he a stepping stone on the road to Egypt's unification, or a rival whose defeat cleared the way for Narmer to claim the two lands? And if his tomb is ever discovered, what secrets might it hold? About him, about the dawn of Egyptian kingship, and about the very birth of pharaonic civilization. The Macehead gives us a name, or at least a symbol, but it does not give us a voice. Until more evidence is found, the Scorpion King remains an enigma, his story lingering in the twilight between history and legend. From the shadowy figure of the Scorpion King, a ruler whose very existence is pieced together from a single artifact, we leap forward thousands of years to one of the most famous discoveries in the history of archaeology. The world of pre-dynastic kings and uncertain symbols gives way to the dazzling golden age of the New Kingdom, and to a tomb whose treasures shocked the modern world. In 1922, Howard Carter descended a narrow staircase cut into the bedrock of the Valley of the Kings and peered through a small hole into darkness. By candlelight, he caught a glint. Gold. Everywhere the glint of gold, as he would later write. He had found the tomb of Tutankhamun, the boy king whose burial would become the most celebrated archaeological discovery of the 20th century. Cave 62 was astonishing not because of its size. It was small compared to other royal tombs, but because it was almost completely intact. Inside were over 5,000 artifacts, gilded shrines, statues, chariots, thrones, jewelry, and the world-famous gold funerary mask. For decades, it was believed that Tutankhamun's tomb had given up all its secrets. But in 2015, nearly a century after Carter's discovery, new technology brought KV-62 back into the spotlight. Nicholas Reeves, a British Egyptologist, proposed that the north wall of Tutankhamun's burial chamber might conceal a hidden doorway, and behind it, perhaps, a secret chamber. Reeves suggested that this chamber could contain the burial of none other than Queen Nefertiti, the enigmatic wife of Akhenaten, and one of the most iconic figures of ancient Egypt. The idea electrified the archaeological community and the public alike. High-resolution scans of the tomb walls seemed to reveal subtle linear traces, as if doorways had once been plastered over and painted to match the surrounding decoration. Ground-penetrating radar studies followed, with some results suggesting the presence of voids beyond the walls. If true, the implications were staggering. Could Tutankhamun's tomb have been a hastily repurposed burial, originally meant for someone else? Could one of the most famous women of antiquity lie hidden just meters away from one of the most famous kings? The theory has its supporters and its skeptics. Some argue that the anomalies detected by radar are natural features of the bedrock, not hidden chambers. Others point to the layout of the tomb, which is unusual for a king of the 18th dynasty, as evidence that KF-62 was adapted from a burial originally designed for a queen. Even the artwork on the walls has been scrutinized, with some researchers suggesting that Tutankhamun's face in certain scenes was originally painted as someone else's and later altered. There is also the question of why a queen, even Nefertiti, would have been buried in the Valley of the Kings at all if her memory had been suppressed after the fall of Amarna. Could her burial have been restored under Tutankhamun, her possible son or stepson, as a way of rehabilitating her legacy? Or might the hidden chamber, if it exists, belong to another royal woman altogether? Perhaps Tiye, another wife of Akhenaten, or even Queen Meritaten? Some scholars caution against overly romantic interpretations, reminding us that voids in the rock do not always indicate grand discoveries. The Valley of the Kings is riddled with unfinished corridors, niches, and abandoned tunnels. What radar suggests might be nothing more than natural fissures, and yet the possibility lingers. Tutankhamun's tomb was a product of unusual circumstances. The boy king died suddenly at a young age, and his burial seems to have been arranged in haste. Could the use of a pre-existing tomb, with sealed-off chambers, have been a practical solution to a royal crisis? The search continues, with new scans and studies periodically reigniting debate. Each time researchers return to KV-62, the question remains the same. Is there something more, something we have not yet seen, lying just beyond those painted walls? Standing inside the tomb today, visitors often remark on how small it feels, how intimate. The gilded shrines that once filled the burial chamber now reside in museums, but the walls still glow with the bright colors of scenes painted over 3,000 years ago. To imagine that beyond those walls might lie another burial, untouched, unseen since antiquity, is to feel a shiver of connection across the centuries. If a hidden chamber is eventually found, what might it contain? Another royal mummy? More treasures preserved through chance and secrecy? Or perhaps only an empty space, a reminder that not every mystery has a dramatic answer? For now, the north wall remains unbroken, the chamber, if it exists, still sealed. And so we are left with questions, and with the sense that Tutankhamun's tomb is not yet finished telling its story. Perhaps one day, with new technology and careful excavation, we will step through that wall and see what has lain in darkness for over 3,000 years. Until then, KV-62 remains both a triumph of archaeology and an invitation, a whisper from the past, suggesting that Egypt still has secrets to reveal to those willing to listen. If Tutankhamun's tomb hints that great secrets may still lie hidden beneath the sands, Abydos reminds us that some mysteries are carved openly into stone, visible, yet no less perplexing. Deep within the ancient temple of Seti I, in the sacred city of Abydos, a series of hieroglyphic carvings has stirred curiosity and controversy for decades. This temple, dedicated to Osiris, god of the afterlife, is one of the most revered ritual sites in Egypt. Its walls are lined with scenes of kings and gods, intricate cartouches, and prayers to guide the soul through the next world. But on one particular beam, above a doorway in the hypostyle hall, something unexpected seems to emerge from the stone. Here, faint but distinct, are hieroglyphs that some observers believe bear a startling resemblance to modern technology. Shapes that look like a helicopter, a tank, even a futuristic aircraft. The so-called Abydos helicopter has become a favorite subject for books, documentaries, and late-night debates. Could this be evidence of advanced knowledge in the distant past? Or is it, as many Egyptologists argue, simply a case of overlapping inscriptions creating a strange illusion? To understand this carving, we must first look at its context. The Temple of Seti I was completed by his son, Ramesses II, one of Egypt's most prolific builders. Over time, portions of the temple were reinscribed, with older hieroglyphs plastered over and replaced. As the plaster eventually crumbled away, the earlier and later inscriptions merged visually, forming unusual composite shapes. According to Egyptologists, this process, known as palimpsest, can create accidental patterns that appear unfamiliar or even modern to the untrained eye. Indeed, scholars have carefully traced the original hieroglyphs, showing how the helicopter may have been formed by the superimposition of signs meaning to repulse and to protect, among others. From a purely linguistic standpoint, this explanation is consistent and logical. And yet, the carvings continue to fascinate. The human mind is drawn to patterns, and the resemblance is hard to ignore. The curved tail, the cockpit-like front, the rotor shape above. If this is merely a coincidence, it is an uncanny one. Could there be more to it than chance? Some alternative researchers have suggested that the Abydos carvings are a glimpse of lost knowledge, that perhaps the Egyptians preserved memories of technologies from an earlier age, or even contact with something beyond their own civilization. These ideas stretch far beyond mainstream scholarship, but they persist, fueled by humanity's deep curiosity about the past. The debate invites deeper questions. How much do we really know about what was recorded on these temple walls? Could there be symbolic or ritual meanings we no longer understand? After all, hieroglyphic writing was as much an art form as a means of communication with layers of meaning, spiritual, political, cosmic, all encoded into the same space. Abydos itself adds to the mystery. This was not just any city, it was the spiritual heart of Egypt, the legendary burial place of Osiris. Pilgrims traveled here for millennia to participate in rituals of death and rebirth. Beneath the sands lie tombs dating back to the very first dynasties, and some scholars argue, perhaps even earlier. Was this place chosen for its sanctity, or because it preserved something from Egypt's forgotten beginnings? The helicopter carving, whether accident or message, seems to capture this larger truth, that Abydos is a site where the past and present overlap, where old and new meanings blur. Just as the plastered inscriptions created layered images, the city itself is layered with history. Dynastic, pre-dynastic, and perhaps something older still. Standing in the temple, the air cool and still, the beam lies high above, requiring one to crane the neck just to glimpse it. The carvings are faint, worn by centuries, yet the mind fills in the shapes. It is easy to imagine why so many feel a quiet sense of wonder here. What did the ancient priests see when they looked upon this wall? Did they notice the merging of symbols? Did it mean something to them? In the end, we are left with an image that is both ordinary and extraordinary. A cluster of hieroglyphs that might be nothing more than an accident of time, or that might hint, however faintly, at something we have yet to fully grasp. The Abydos helicopter remains a reminder that not all mysteries lie hidden in sealed chambers or undiscovered tombs. Some stare at us in plain sight, challenging our understanding not through absence, but through presence. Whether artifact of chance or deliberate symbol, it invites us to look closer, to question what we think we know about the language of the ancients, and to wonder whether there are still messages waiting to be uncovered, written not in stone but in the spaces between. If the carvings of Abydos remind us that the past can speak in layered, ambiguous symbols, the coffin of Amenemhat takes us even deeper, into the very language of the dead. This remarkable artifact, dating to Egypt's Middle Kingdom, is not a grand stone sarcophagus like those of later pharaohs, but a rectangular wooden box covered inside and out with intricate hieroglyphic inscriptions. The coffin once cradled the remains of a man named Amenemhat, not the famous pharaoh of the 12th dynasty, but likely a provincial governor or official of high rank. Yet it is not the man himself who has captured modern imagination, but the words written to guide him through eternity. Step inside a museum where the coffin now rests, and you are met with a surface alive with symbols, spells, prayers, maps of the underworld, all carefully painted in black ink on the pale wood. Collectively, these writings are known as the coffin texts, a vast collection of funerary spells that evolved from the earlier pyramid texts of the Old Kingdom. Their purpose was deeply practical by ancient Egyptian standards, to ensure the safe passage of the soul, or BA, through the dangers of the afterlife and into the field of reeds, the eternal paradise. But among these spells, Amenemhat's coffin preserves something curious. Certain passages stand out for their unusual wording, as if they were part of a narrative or vision that does not appear elsewhere in the corpus. Scholars have debated their meaning for decades. Are these simply regional variations, local priests preserving their own version of the sacred text? Or could they represent a glimpse into a now lost tradition of spiritual thought? One of the most striking features is a text that seems to describe the deceased taking on a divine role, not merely joining the gods, but, in a sense, becoming one. This transformation is described in language that is unusually personal, even mystical, suggesting a view of the afterlife that was intimate rather than purely ritualistic. Was Amenemhat's coffin a reflection of private spiritual beliefs? Or was it part of a broader but little documented religious movement during the turbulent First Intermediate Period and early Middle Kingdom? The more we read, the more enigmatic the coffin becomes. Certain spells appear to reference mythical journeys or cosmic events that are difficult to place in the familiar Egyptian canon. Some Egyptologists suggest these are allegories, poetic descriptions of sunrise, flooding, or seasonal change, while others see hints of forgotten myth cycles. There are even researchers who argue that these passages preserve fragments of very ancient oral traditions, dating back to Egypt's formative centuries, now surviving only because they were copied into coffins like this one. Then there is the question of why Amenemhat's coffin is so densely inscribed. Every available surface seems to have been used, almost as if the texts themselves formed a protective shell. Was this an act of devotion, ensuring no spell was left unused? Or could it be seen as a kind of coded message, a library in miniature, preserving knowledge at a time when Egypt was re-emerging from political fragmentation? Speculation has gone further still. Some fringe theories suggest that certain cryptic passages describe celestial events, alignments of stars, eclipses, or even catastrophic floods. Could the coffin contain, in symbolic form, a record of real events witnessed by Egypt's early inhabitants? Or are we simply reading too much into a text that was never meant to be interpreted so literally? Whatever the answer, Amenemhat's coffin captures a transitional moment in Egyptian religion, a democratization of the afterlife. No longer were the secrets of eternity reserved for kings alone. Inscriptions once carved only on pyramid walls were now being written for governors, nobles, and eventually commoners. This was a profound cultural shift, one that redefined the relationship between the living, the dead, and the divine. Yet with this democratization came variation. The coffin texts are famously inconsistent from one coffin to another. Some include unique spells not found anywhere else. Others omit passages that would seem essential. Was there a central priestly authority overseeing these texts, or did local scribes have the freedom to innovate, to adapt, to experiment? Standing before Amenemhat's coffin today, the ink still clear after nearly 4,000 years, one is struck by how much it feels like a conversation across time. Here is a man preparing for death, not with fear, but with instruction, equipping himself with every tool he might need for the journey ahead. And yet, the precise meaning of some of these tools remains just beyond our reach. Are we missing key pieces of the puzzle? Papyri that have turned to dust? Oral traditions that were never written down? Or is the mystery part of the design, the texts deliberately obscure to ensure they could only be unlocked by those properly initiated into their secrets? Amenemhat's coffin invites us to see writing not just as communication, but as magic, a bridge between the world of the living and the eternal. Each line of hieroglyphs is a spell, a promise, a key. But how many of those keys have we truly learned to turn? And so, we are left to wonder, what else might be waiting in forgotten tombs and buried caches? Not gold or jewels, but words, spells, ideas. capable of reshaping our understanding of how the ancient Egyptians saw life, death, and what lay beyond? If the coffin of Amenemhat reminds us that the ancient Egyptians sought to preserve spiritual knowledge in words, the tomb of Tutankhamun offers a different kind of preservation, physical, material, almost cosmic. Among the 5,000 artifacts Howard Carter uncovered in KO 62, few are as captivating as a single dagger, resting in its sheath, placed carefully at the thigh of the young king's mummy. Unlike the ceremonial weapons and symbolic scepters also buried with him, this blade is strikingly practical, slim, sharp, and made not of copper or bronze, but of iron. That detail alone is extraordinary. In the 14th century BCE, iron was exceedingly rare in Egypt. The full mastery of iron smelting would not come until centuries later, in the Iron Age. For most Egyptians of Tutankhamun's time, iron was a curiosity, sometimes even called metal from the sky. And indeed, modern analysis has revealed that this dagger was forged from meteoritic iron, iron that came not from the earth, but from a meteorite that fell from space. Imagine that for a moment. A fragment of cosmic debris, perhaps seen streaking through the sky in a blazing fireball, later collected, shaped, and polished into a blade fit for a king. To the ancient Egyptians, who saw the heavens as a realm of gods and eternal cycles, such a material must have carried profound symbolic power. The dagger is masterfully crafted. Its blade is smooth and free from impurities, suggesting that the smith who made it had extraordinary skill in working a material that was notoriously difficult to forge. Its handle is made of crystal and gold, its sheath delicately decorated. This was no ordinary grave good. It was an object of status, a talisman as much as a weapon. But where did this meteorite come from? And who had the ability to work such metal so skillfully, centuries before iron was commonplace? Studies using X-ray fluorescence have traced the blade's composition to a meteorite field in the desert west of Alexandria. Was this dagger a gift from a foreign power, perhaps from the Hittites, who were beginning to experiment with iron at this time? Or did Egypt itself have smiths capable of such sophisticated work, far earlier than previously believed? There is also a more symbolic question. Why was this particular blade placed so close to Tutankhamun's body? Was it meant to protect him on his journey through the underworld, a divine weapon against the dangers that lurked there? Or was its presence meant to signify something more? A link between the king and the heavens, a reminder that the pharaoh was, in Egyptian belief, a child of the gods, destined to ascend to the stars after death. Some scholars have suggested that meteorites may have been ritually significant long before Tutankhamun. Small beads of meteoritic iron dating back to the pre-dynastic period have been found in Gerzeh, crafted into jewelry as early as 3200 BCE. This implies that Egyptians had been collecting and venerating celestial metal for over 1,000 years before the boy king's burial. And yet, the dagger stands apart. It is not a bead or an amulet, but a weapon. Functional, elegant, enduring. It challenges our timeline of technological development, hinting that the knowledge of working iron may have existed in isolated pockets, lost and rediscovered over centuries. Was this knowledge deliberately kept secret, passed only among select craftsmen serving the royal court? Or was the dagger truly unique, a singular experiment that happened to survive when so much else was lost? In recent years, scientists have attempted to recreate the forging of meteoritic iron, finding that it requires extraordinary precision to avoid cracking the brittle material. Whoever made Tutankhamun's dagger did so flawlessly. Was this the work of Egyptian artisans, or of foreign smiths whose techniques have long since vanished from history? There are more speculative questions too, the kind that linger in the imagination. The ancient Egyptians viewed the sky not as an empty void, but as a living being. the goddess Nut, who arched over the earth. Stars were her children, and meteorites might have been seen as pieces of her divine body falling to the mortal realm. If so, then Tutankhamun's dagger was not merely metal. It was a fragment of the heavens, forged into a blade so that the young pharaoh might carry a piece of the sky with him into eternity. Standing before the dagger today, its polished surface still gleaming, one cannot help but feel a sense of quiet awe. This is not just an artifact. It is a story written in metal, a story that began billions of years ago in the heart of a distant asteroid, traveled through the cold emptiness of space, fell to Earth in a burst of fire, and was finally placed in the tomb of a boy king. What other objects like this might still lie hidden, waiting to be discovered? Were there other meteorite blades, other cosmic relics buried with rulers whose tombs have yet to be found? Or was Tutankhamun's dagger truly one of a kind, a singular shining link between the ancient Egyptians and the stars they worshipped? For now, the blade rests in Cairo, displayed behind glass, a silent reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary mysteries are not hidden deep beneath the ground, but lie in plain sight, inviting us to wonder, to investigate, and to imagine. If Tutankhamun's dagger connects us to the heavens, the next mystery draws us back to the earth, to a place where ancient writers claimed a wonder so vast, so complex, that it rivaled the Great Pyramid itself. Travel south of Cairo, past the fertile fields of the Fayum oasis, and you reach Hawara, a site that at first glance seems quiet, unassuming. Today, it is little more than sand, rubble, and scattered fragments of stone. But 2,000 years ago, this place was home to what Herodotus called one of the most astonishing monuments in Egypt, a colossal labyrinth that, according to him, surpassed even the pyramids in grandeur. Herodotus, the Greek historian writing in the 5th century BCE, described a structure with 12 great courts and over 3,000 rooms, half above ground and half below. He claimed to have walked through its halls, marveling at its endless chambers, its richly carved walls, and its dizzying complexity. Words are not enough to describe its wonders, he wrote, suggesting that no one who had not seen it could truly understand its scale. Other classical writers, including Strabo and Diodorus Siculus, repeated similar accounts. They spoke of long corridors, colonnaded halls, and sacred chambers where crocodiles, the sacred animal of the Fayum, were kept and mummified. Some even suggested that the labyrinth was the burial place of the kings of the 12th dynasty, including Amenemhat III, who is known to have built his pyramid at Hawara. And yet, when modern archaeologists began to excavate the site in the 19th and early 20th centuries, they found little evidence of this grand maze. Flinders Petrie, one of Egypt's most meticulous excavators, uncovered the remains of what appeared to be a massive stone platform near Amenemhat III's pyramid, the foundation, he believed, of the labyrinth described by Herodotus. But if the platform was all that remained, where had the structure itself gone? Some suggest that the labyrinth was dismantled in antiquity, its stones reused for other building projects, leaving only the traces Petrie found. Others argue that the labyrinth might still lie buried beneath the sand, waiting for more comprehensive excavation. The Fayum region is known for its high water table, which makes digging difficult, and some researchers believe that large portions of the complex remain hidden below ground. This raises tantalizing questions. Could there still be undiscovered chambers, sealed passages, or royal tombs beneath Hawara? If so, might they contain records of the Middle Kingdom, or treasures that survived the looting that befell so many other sites? The idea of a true labyrinth, a place designed to confound, to conceal, is powerful. Was Hawara's structure purely ceremonial, A grand mortuary temple for Amenemhat III? Or did it serve a deeper purpose, perhaps guarding something considered too sacred or too dangerous to be left unprotected? Some alternative researchers have suggested that the labyrinth could have functioned as an archive, a repository of knowledge carefully hidden away during times of crisis. There is also the question of symbolism. The Egyptians saw architecture not just as physical space, but as a reflection of cosmic order. Could the labyrinth have represented the journey through the underworld, its many corridors echoing the trials and gates that the soul must pass in the afterlife? If so, walking through its halls might have been more than a physical act. It might have been a ritual reenactment of rebirth. The very scale of the building, if Herodotus is to be believed, would have made it one of the most ambitious constructions of the ancient world. Was it ever truly completed, or did later rulers abandon it, leaving only a partial structure that still impressed visiting Greeks? The accounts we have may not describe the same building at all, but rather a composite memory of multiple sites. Standing at Hawara today, with the wind sweeping over the sand and the broken pyramid of Amenemhat III looming in the distance, it is hard to imagine a labyrinth of thousands of rooms once standing here. And yet, the descriptions are too vivid, too consistent across sources to dismiss outright. Modern technology may one day provide answers. Ground-penetrating radar and remote sensing have begun to reveal hints of subsurface structures in the region. Geometric anomalies that could be walls, corridors, or foundations. But until a full-scale excavation is undertaken, the labyrinth remains more legend than reality, a shadow of something that might once have existed. And so we are left with the image painted by Herodotus. A vast network of halls and rooms filled with mystery, its purpose still uncertain. Was it a temple? A tomb complex? A record hall holding the wisdom of a dynasty? Or was it something stranger still? A place where religion, politics, and cosmology converged in ways we are only beginning to understand? The sands of Hawara keep their secrets well. Perhaps beneath them lies one of the last great architectural wonders of the ancient world, waiting to be rediscovered. Or perhaps the labyrinth exists only in the words of travelers long gone, a memory carved not in stone, but in story. If the labyrinth of Hawara represents a civilization at its height, organized, monumental, and confident, then to truly understand Egypt's story, we must journey back to its very beginning, to a time before pyramids, before hieroglyphs adorned stone walls, before Egypt was even Egypt. In the wind-swept desert of Upper Egypt, near the ancient city of Hierakonpolis, archaeologists uncovered an artifact that would change our understanding of the dawn of Egyptian civilization. Known as the Narmer palette, it is a large, ceremonial piece of green schist, over 2 feet tall, its surface carved with scenes both familiar and strange. On one side, a figure wearing the tall white crown of Upper Egypt strikes a defeated enemy with a raised mace, the classic pose of the victorious pharaoh. On the other side, the same figure wears the red crown of Lower Egypt, presiding over a procession. Between these images are strange, animal-headed figures, intertwined beasts whose necks form a perfect circle, and rows of decapitated foes. The object is beautiful, precise, and deeply symbolic. But it is also one of the earliest historical records we have from Egypt, dating to around 3100 BCE, and it bears a single name, Narmer. Who was this man? Mainstream historians generally agree that Narmer was either the first king of a unified Egypt or the last of the pre-dynastic rulers who paved the way for unification. His reign marks the start of what we now call the First Dynasty, the point where Upper and Lower Egypt were joined into one kingdom. But beyond this broad outline, the details become elusive. Some scholars identify Narmer with another figure, Menes, a semi-legendary king recorded by later Egyptian historians as the one who first united the two lands. Was Narmer and Menes the same person, with different names used in different periods? Or were they two separate rulers, one completing what the other began? This question has led to decades of debate. The Narmer palette is not a historical text in the way later inscriptions would be. It is more a symbolic proclamation. Are we seeing literal events depicted on its surface? Or is this an idealized statement of power, a kind of ancient political poster designed to announce Narmer's divine right to rule? And if Narmer was indeed the first pharaoh, what kind of Egypt did he inherit? And what kind of Egypt did he create? The unification of Upper and Lower Egypt was not a simple act. It required diplomacy, warfare, and an entirely new vision of kingship. The pharaoh was no longer just a local ruler. He became the living embodiment of Horus, the god of kingship, a bridge between the human and the divine. But mysteries remain. Archaeologists have uncovered Narmer's tomb at Abydos, two adjoining chambers marked by simple mud brick walls, yet the tomb itself is humble compared to later royal burials. Was Narmer's final resting place plundered, or was his burial intentionally modest? Some researchers wonder whether Narmer's true tomb still lies hidden somewhere beneath the sands, waiting to be discovered. There are also questions about how far his influence reached. Some artifacts bearing Narmer's name have been found as far away as Canaan, suggesting he may have extended Egypt's power beyond the Nile Valley. Was Narmer merely a local king who happened to unite two regions, or was he the founder of Egypt's first empire? Alternative theories push the mystery further. Some suggest that Narmer may have been part of a lineage that arrived in Egypt from elsewhere, perhaps from the south, perhaps from the east, bringing with them new technologies, artistic styles, and religious ideas. Could the unification of Egypt have been more than a political event? Could it have been the merging of two very different cultural traditions into something entirely new? Even the name Narmer invites speculation. It is often translated as fierce catfish, a strange and evocative image that might hold symbolic meaning lost to us today. Was this a personal name, a throne name, or a title meant to convey power in a way we no longer understand? Standing before the Narmer palette in the Cairo Museum, one cannot help but feel its weight, not just the physical heft of carved stone, but the weight of history. Here, in these images, we see the birth of an idea that would endure for 3,000 years. The idea of Egypt as one nation under one ruler, protected by the gods, eternal as the Nile itself. And yet, the man behind the images remains in shadow. Was Narmer a conqueror, a visionary, a unifier, or all three? Did he live long enough to see the dream of a united Egypt fully realized, or was that vision completed by those who came after him? We may never know for certain. The sands of Abydos and Hierakonpolis may still hold more clues. Undiscovered tombs, hidden inscriptions, forgotten artifacts that could one day tell us more about this enigmatic figure. Until then, Narmer stands at the threshold of history, a king half in legend, half in reality, inviting us to peer back into a time when the idea of Egypt was just beginning to take shape. Perhaps, somewhere beneath the desert floor, the first true story of Egypt's first true king still waits to be uncovered. If Narmer's unification marked the symbolic birth of Egypt, then Aswan, far to the south, represents the heartbeat of its monumental ambition. It is here, in the rose-red granite quarries of ancient Syene, that some of Egypt's most iconic monuments began their journey. The colossal statues of Ramses II, the sarcophagi of pharaohs, and the towering obelisks that once crowned temple gateways, all were carved from this very stone. And here too, half buried and forever incomplete, lies one of the most enigmatic artifacts of the ancient world, the unfinished obelisk. Stretching nearly 42 meters in length and weighing an estimated 1,200 tons, it would have been the largest obelisk ever raised in ancient Egypt, taller than any that stands today. Yet it was never freed from the bedrock. Visitors to the site can still trace the tool marks along its surface, see where it was carefully shaped, and where, tragically, a deep crack appeared, condemning it to remain where it was born. Standing at its side, the obelisk feels almost alive, like a sleeping giant pinned to the earth. The sunlight catches on its smooth upper surface, revealing the extraordinary precision of its makers. Even after thousands of years, the cuts are clean, the angles exact. This was not the work of crude chisels or hesitant hands. This was industrial-scale stoneworking, performed with confidence and skill that still astonishes modern engineers. How did they do it? Mainstream archaeology offers a reconstruction. Ancient workers likely used dolerite pounders, harder stones, to chip away at the granite, one strike at a time, until the monolith was fully shaped. Wooden wedges may have been used to pry it loose, water swelling the wood to separate the obelisk from the bedrock. But even with this explanation, questions remain. Could such a massive object have been shaped, moved, and erected with only these simple tools? Modern experiments have shown that it is possible, but extraordinarily labor-intensive, requiring thousands of workers over many years. And this leads to another mystery. Why attempt a project of this scale at all? What ceremonial or religious purpose would a single obelisk of this size serve that smaller ones could not? Some researchers suggest that this obelisk was commissioned by Hatshepsut, the powerful female pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, as part of her ambitious building program at Karnak. Others argue that it may date earlier or later, its intended purpose lost to time. Then there is the question of its incompletion. The crack that halted the work is often cited as the reason the project was abandoned. But was that truly the case? The fracture is significant, yes, but could it not have been repaired, or the stone reworked into a smaller obelisk? Was the real reason for its abandonment practical or symbolic? Some alternative theories go further, proposing that the obelisk may represent a failed experiment, a leap in engineering that pushed the limits of what the Egyptians could achieve. Perhaps it was left deliberately, a cautionary monument to ambition. And yet, there are other, more speculative voices that suggest the unfinished obelisk holds clues to something deeper, that its size, its alignment, even its unfinished state, may encode astronomical or religious knowledge we have not yet deciphered. Could it have been intended not merely as a marker for a temple, but as a cosmic instrument, a kind of gigantic needle pointing toward the heavens? Standing on the quarry floor, it is easy to see why such ideas emerge. The obelisk points roughly toward the Nile, and when you imagine it raised, its tip would have pierced the sky, gleaming in the sunlight, its pyramidion possibly gilded to reflect the rays of Ra. For the Egyptians, such monuments were not inert stone. They were living symbols of divine power, channels through which the energy of the gods flowed into the world. And so the unfinished obelisk invites us to imagine what it might have meant had it been completed. Would it have stood at Karnak, twin to one of the other colossal obelisks still standing there today? Would it have marked a solar alignment, casting a shadow on a particular day of the year? Or was its very incompletion meant to leave a message for the future? A silent reminder that even Egypt's mightiest builders were not infallible? Modern archaeologists and engineers continue to study the site, examining tool marks, quarrying techniques, and the logistics of ancient stone transport. Each discovery adds a fragment to the puzzle, but the full picture remains elusive. Perhaps that is why the unfinished obelisk captures the imagination so powerfully. It is a moment frozen in time, the work abandoned, the tools put down, the dream left unrealized. It is as if the ancient quarry workers had simply stepped away, leaving behind a mystery for us to ponder. As the sun sets over Aswan, the obelisk takes on a different quality. Its massive shadow stretches across the quarry floor, and the stone glows softly in the fading light. One cannot help but wonder what other monuments lie undiscovered beneath the sands, or how many more colossal ambitions remain buried in silence. If this is what the Egyptians left unfinished, what wonders must they have completed, and what secrets of their engineering genius have we yet to rediscover? If the quarries of Aswan remind us of Egypt's power to build, then the desert sands reveal its power to innovate. From massive obelisks and temple pylons, we shift now to something far more delicate, yet just as transformative in its time: the Egyptian chariot wheel. It was in the arid expanse of the eastern desert and along the shifting banks of the Nile that archaeologists began uncovering fragments of wheels, axles, and even entire chariots preserved for more than 3,000 years. One of the most extraordinary discoveries came from the tomb of Tutankhamun. Not one, but 6 chariots carefully dismantled and stored for the afterlife. Among them was a lightweight ceremonial chariot with a wheel so finely crafted that its construction still challenges modern woodworkers. The wheel itself, simple at first glance, is a marvel of ancient engineering. 6 spokes radiate from a central hub, the joints reinforced with rawhide and sinew, the rim composed of multiple pieces of wood precisely fitted together. This was not a rough battlefield tool. It was light, balanced, and elegant, designed for speed and maneuverability. But the mystery deepens when we consider the timeline. The chariot is thought to have been introduced to Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period, around 1600 BCE, possibly by the Hyksos, a Semitic people who came to dominate northern Egypt for a time. Yet the sophistication of the Egyptian examples suggests not mere adoption, but refinement, perhaps even perfection, of the technology. How quickly could Egypt have gone from learning of the chariot to producing some of the most advanced versions of the ancient world? Some historians argue that the Egyptians improved on the design by making the chariot lighter, moving the axle to the rear for greater stability, and even developing leather-wrapped wheels for a smoother ride. These changes turned the chariot into a weapon of precision, capable of swift charges and rapid retreats across the battlefield. But there is another layer to this story. In recent years, divers have reported the discovery of chariot wheels, or what appear to be wheels, in the Red Sea, near a site traditionally associated with the biblical Exodus. Images of coral-encrusted shapes resembling spokes and hubs have circulated widely, sparking speculation. Are these relics of a lost Egyptian army? Could they be evidence of a catastrophic event, remembered in religious texts as the parting of the sea? Mainstream archaeology is cautious here. Many of these underwater formations may be natural coral growths, not actual wheels, and no verified chariot remains have yet been conclusively identified from this location. Still, the idea persists, partly because Egypt's own written records are strangely silent about certain defeats, as if the scribes deliberately erased them from history. And then there is the symbolic role of the chariot in Egyptian culture. Beyond its military use, the chariot became an icon of royal power. Pharaohs are often shown riding them in hunting scenes, loosing arrows at gazelles or lions, their posture confident and divine. On temple walls, victorious kings drive their chariots into battle, trampling enemies beneath their wheels. Was the chariot merely a technological advance, or was it transformed into a tool of propaganda, a moving throne from which the pharaoh displayed his authority? Some researchers even suggest that chariots played a ceremonial or ritual role beyond what we see in battle scenes. Could they have been used in religious processions, perhaps symbolizing the journey of the sun god across the sky? The lightweight nature of some chariots, too fragile for the rigors of war, supports this possibility. The wheel itself also carries symbolic weight. A perfect circle, it represents cycles of time, eternity, and order, all central themes in Egyptian cosmology. Is it possible that the very act of creating a wheel was not just practical but spiritual, aligning the human world with the eternal order of Maat? And yet, the practical questions remain. How were these wheels constructed with such precision? What tools were used to bend and shape the wood so uniformly, to carve the mortise and tenon joints that hold the spokes? And how did the Egyptians maintain these chariots in the heat and dust of the desert? Modern reconstructions have shown that such wheels are vulnerable to warping and damage, yet Egyptian reliefs depict them being driven at full speed, sometimes with 2 men aboard. The discovery of the chariot wheel fragments and full chariots has opened a window into a time when Egypt's power was mobile, swift, and unstoppable. But like the unfinished obelisk, these wheels also leave us with questions. They remind us that behind every artifact is a story of invention, adaptation, and perhaps even mystery. As you stand before Tutankhamun's chariots in the museum, the wood gleaming softly under the lights, you cannot help but imagine the sound they once made. The creak of the wheels, the thunder of hooves, the shout of the driver as the chariot raced across the desert plain. And you wonder how many other chariots still lie buried beneath the sands, or hidden in tombs yet to be opened. Perhaps one day another discovery, a perfectly preserved battlefield chariot, or a wheel still bearing traces of its last journey, will tell us more about how Egypt's warriors lived, fought, and died. Until then, the chariot wheel remains both a triumph of engineering and a reminder that the ancient world still holds secrets we have yet to uncover. From the speed and motion of the chariot, we descend, literally, into stillness. Beneath the sands of the Giza plateau, where the great pyramids rise like eternal sentinels, lies a place shrouded in darkness and mystery. It is not a pyramid, nor a temple, nor a tomb in the conventional sense. Locals have called it the Tomb of Osiris, though its true purpose remains uncertain. To archaeologists, it is known simply as the Giza shaft. This enigmatic structure was rediscovered in the late 1990s, hidden beneath a nondescript opening near the causeway of the Pyramid of Khafra. At first glance, the entrance seems unremarkable, a simple pit cut into the bedrock. But as one descends, the mystery deepens. The shaft drops straight down, nearly 10 meters into a flooded chamber. From there, a narrow passage leads to a second, deeper shaft, descending yet again into the earth. The air grows colder, the light grows thin. Finally, after a third descent, the explorer emerges into a chamber unlike anything else on the Giza plateau. A cavernous space hewn directly into the limestone bedrock, its walls rough yet purposeful, as if carved to evoke both awe and dread. At the center of this subterranean room lies a massive granite sarcophagus, empty and silent, surrounded by smaller niches cut into the walls. The layout is strikingly symbolic. Some researchers believe it was meant to represent the mythical underworld, the Duat, and that the sarcophagus stood for the god Osiris himself, ruler of the dead. But was this truly a tomb? Mainstream archaeologists suggest that the shaft may have been a cenotaph, a symbolic tomb rather than an actual burial place. Built during the 26th dynasty, long after the pyramids themselves were constructed. If so, it may have served as a ceremonial site where priests performed rituals connected to Osiris, reenacting the myth of his death and resurrection. And yet, questions persist. Why build such a structure here at Giza and at such extraordinary depth? What exactly was placed inside the central sarcophagus? And why was it removed, leaving the chamber empty? Some fringe researchers have gone further, proposing that the shaft predates the pyramids themselves, perhaps by centuries or even millennia. Could it be part of an even older sacred complex, one that influenced the placement of the pyramids above? If so, who carved it, and for what purpose? The symbolism is difficult to ignore. The descent through multiple levels could represent the soul's journey through the underworld, passing through gates or trials before reaching the presence of Osiris. Was this a site where initiates were lowered into darkness, perhaps as part of a ritual death and rebirth experience, a physical passage meant to mirror spiritual transformation? There are also practical questions. The engineering required to dig 3 levels straight down into solid rock is impressive. How did ancient builders remove the debris? How did they prevent the shafts from flooding? Or did they see the presence of water as part of the design, a connection to the primeval waters of creation? Water has always been a symbol of rebirth in Egyptian cosmology, associated with the god Nun and the idea of creation emerging from chaos. Even today, the lowest chamber of the Osiris shaft is often partially submerged. Could this have been intentional? A deliberate attempt to create a liminal space between the world of the living and the waters of the afterlife? As with so many sites in Egypt, hard evidence is elusive. No inscriptions within the shaft name its builders or explain its purpose. No artifacts have been found that clearly date its construction. And so we are left with a void, a space that seems to invite interpretation. Some have connected the shaft to the broader landscape of Giza, suggesting it may be part of a complex network of tunnels beneath the plateau. Could there be more chambers, more shafts, still hidden beneath the sand? Could this entire area have served as an ancient necropolis or even an initiation center for priests and pharaohs? Standing in the lowest chamber, knee-deep in still black water, one feels a silence that is almost oppressive. The stone walls seem to absorb sound, leaving only the faint echo of dripping water. It is a place that feels both sacred and unsettling, a place where the boundary between past and present grows thin. The tomb of Osiris reminds us that Egypt was not merely a civilization of sunlit temples and towering pyramids. It was also a culture deeply concerned with the unseen, with what lay beneath the earth and beyond death itself. The shaft may never yield all its secrets. Its emptiness might be its message, its silence its most eloquent statement. But it leaves us with a tantalizing question. What else lies hidden under Giza? How many more shafts, tunnels, and chambers remain sealed, waiting for someone to descend into the darkness and bring their stories back to the surface? From the shadowed depths of the Osiris shaft, we now step into another subterranean world, one not just of stone, but of words. Deep inside the Pyramid of Unas at Saqqara, the last ruler of Egypt's 5th dynasty, we find walls covered with the oldest known religious texts on Earth, the Pyramid texts. At first glance, the burial chamber is surprisingly small and unadorned compared to the towering pyramids of Giza. The walls are limestone, smoothed but not polished, the space tight and intimate. And yet, every inch of the walls is carved with thousands of vertical lines of hieroglyphs, each sign carefully cut into the stone. When the pyramid was first opened in the late 19th century, archaeologists were astonished. These were not decorative inscriptions meant to glorify the pharaoh's reign. There were no triumphal scenes, no records of battles or conquests. Instead, they were spells, hundreds of them. Prayers, hymns, and invocations designed to guide the king's spirit through the perilous journey of the afterlife. They speak of Unas becoming one with the gods, of ascending to the stars, of overcoming serpents and hostile spirits, of crossing the celestial waters to join Ra, the sun god, on his eternal voyage. Some of the spells are practical, even urgent, offering protection against decapitation, drowning, or starvation in the next world. Others are more cosmic, describing the king's transformation into an immortal being, a shining star in the night sky. But among these texts are some of the most haunting words ever written in the ancient world. In one passage, Unas is described as consuming the flesh of gods and men, devouring their powers in order to claim his place among the divine. Scholars call these the cannibal hymns, and their meaning is still debated. Are they meant to be taken literally, describing a ritual act once performed in a distant past? Or are they metaphorical, expressing the king's absolute absorption of divine power? The very existence of the pyramid texts raises profound questions. Why did they first appear in the reign of Unas? Were such spells known before but kept secret, passed down orally by priests? And why do they vanish again for a time after Unas, only to reappear later in other pyramids and tombs? Some historians believe these texts mark a turning point in Egyptian religion, a moment when the afterlife became codified, systematized, almost bureaucratic. For the first time, the pharaoh had a written map of the next world, a set of instructions for navigating eternity. But were these words meant for Unas alone, or for anyone who could access them? Over time, similar spells appear in the Coffin texts and later the Book of the Dead, making the afterlife accessible not just to kings, but to ordinary Egyptians. And there is another layer of mystery. The texts are not randomly placed. Their order and positioning on the walls seem deliberate, as though the entire burial chamber was transformed into a ritual space, a kind of magical machine designed to activate the king's rebirth. Could the combination of architecture and text have been meant to create a spiritual technology, a way of ensuring that Unas would not merely survive death, but be transformed by it? Some researchers have noticed astronomical references hidden in the spells, allusions to stars and constellations that might have aligned with the pyramid's shafts or its orientation on the plateau. Could the Pyramid of Unas have been designed as a kind of star map, its texts linking earth and sky, body and spirit? And what of the strange imagery found within? The pyramid texts speak of the king mounting ladders to heaven, of being ferried across celestial waters by divine boatmen, of being greeted by gods who place crowns on his head. Are these simply poetic metaphors, or do they preserve memories of ancient rituals, even altered states of consciousness, performed by priests in darkness and silence? Standing inside the burial chamber today, one feels the weight of those words. The hieroglyphs, once painted a deep green, the color of rebirth, still seem to glow faintly in the dim light. The space is quiet, almost claustrophobic, yet charged with meaning. It is as though the walls are speaking, even now, whispering the same spells they once recited to guide Unas through the stars. But many questions remain unanswered. Were these texts written by priests during Unas's lifetime, or inscribed only after his death? Were they innovations of a single generation, or fragments of a much older tradition stretching back into prehistory? And why did this revolution in funerary practice begin here, in the smallest pyramid of the Old Kingdom, rather than in one of the grander monuments of earlier kings? Perhaps the pyramid texts of Unas are less a statement and more an invitation, a glimpse into the Egyptian mind at a moment when they were grappling with the biggest question of all: what happens after death? And if these were the first words carved into stone to answer that question, what other, earlier words might still lie hidden, waiting to be found? From the sacred words carved deep within the Pyramid of Unas, we move into the hushed galleries of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, where another kind of mystery waits, silent and small, behind a glass case. At first glance, it is unassuming. A small wooden object, only about 14 centimeters long, its surface worn smooth by time. Its body is narrow and delicate, its wings gently curved, its tail vertical rather than horizontal. An odd feature, unusual for a simple bird carving. It has come to be known as the Saqqara Bird, named after the necropolis where it was unearthed in 1898. Unlike many artifacts discovered in Egypt, its purpose is not immediately clear. It was found not in a temple, nor a workshop, but in a tomb dating back to around 200 BCE during the Ptolemaic period. Some suggest it may have been a toy, perhaps placed in the grave of a child as a simple symbol of play. Others have called it a ceremonial object, a representation of Horus, the falcon-headed sky god, protector of kings. But when examined closely, its form seems to suggest something more. The wings are straight and aerodynamic, tapering gently toward the tips. The tail, set vertically like a rudder, seems designed to control airflow. There are no feet carved on its body, as one would expect if it were merely a figurine of a bird at rest. Instead, it appears to have been shaped for motion, for flight. This observation has sparked decades of speculation. Could the Saqqara bird represent an early understanding of aerodynamics? Was it simply a coincidence that its shape resembles a glider? Or was that by design? Modern experiments have attempted to answer this question. Replicas of the bird have been created and tested in wind tunnels and as free-flying models. Some researchers report that, with minor modifications, such as a stabilizing horizontal tailplane, the object is capable of gliding through the air. This has led to one of the more provocative suggestions, that the Saqqara bird may have been a model for a larger flying machine. But is this conclusion too ambitious? Mainstream Egyptologists remain cautious. There is no evidence of flight technology in ancient Egypt, no written texts describing gliders, no depictions of humans soaring above the Nile Valley. Most scholars prefer to interpret the object as symbolic, a votive offering meant to invoke the concept of flight on a spiritual level, not a literal one. And yet, the mystery persists. The ancient Egyptians were keen observers of nature, master engineers who built monuments that still puzzle modern architects. They understood balance, symmetry, and weight distribution, principles that are crucial in aviation. Could it be possible that someone, at some point, experimented with the idea of flight? Not for practical transportation, but for ritual or symbolic purposes? There are other clues that invite further thought. The falcon was not merely a bird to the Egyptians. It was the sky itself, a symbol of kingship and divine authority. Could the Saqqara bird have been used in temple rituals, perhaps thrown into the air to fly before an altar, symbolizing the soul's journey to the heavens? Then there are the more speculative theories. Some fringe researchers argue that the artifact may represent evidence of lost knowledge, remnants of an earlier advanced understanding of flight, forgotten by the time of recorded history. They point to other enigmatic discoveries, such as reliefs showing unusual winged shapes, or myths describing gods descending from the sky. Could the Saqqara bird be a memory carved in wood, a symbolic echo of something long past? Still, caution must be exercised. The object is fragile, incomplete. A piece of its tail is missing, and we may never know what its original form looked like. Perhaps its function was far simpler than we imagine, its meaning purely ritual, its design merely coincidental. Standing before its glass case today, the Saqqara bird seems to hold its secrets tightly. It is small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, yet it continues to inspire debates that stretch across continents and disciplines. Was it a child's toy, a temple offering, a model meant to teach or even to test? Or was it something more, a glimpse into a dream the ancients once pursued? The dream of leaving the earth and touching the sky? Like the hieroglyphs that line the burial chamber of Unas, the Saqqara bird seems to speak to us from across the millennia, reminding us that the people of ancient Egypt were not so different from ourselves. They too looked up at the heavens, wondering if they might someday join the falcon in its flight. And perhaps that is its true purpose, not to provide answers, but to stir questions. To invite us to imagine what else might still lie hidden in the sands of Saqqara, waiting to be found.